Waitress gets fired for helping undercover boss. 24 hours later, her life completely changes. She served a stranger with kindness and got fired for it. But the next morning, she walked back in as the new boss. Clara Bennett wasn't looking for trouble. She never had been. She wasn't the kind of person who started fights or played politics. She believed in showing up, doing the work, and treating people with basic decency. Simple things. Things she thought still mattered. For nearly 3 years, Rose Lake Diner had been her second home, a cozy little spot tucked between a pharmacy and a tire shop on the south side of Ashton, Illinois. The kind of place where truckers stopped before sunrise, teenagers came after football practice, and the coffee pot never ran dry. It wasn't glamorous, the pay was modest, and the respect? That depended on who you were. You got smiles if you looked polished, if your shoes were clean, and your wallet looked full. But if you didn't? If you wore your struggle on your sleeves? Well, let's just say some staff made up their minds before taking your order. Clara saw it. Every day. The favoritism. The quiet discrimination. The way Amanda, the senior waitress, decided who was worth her time. How Derek skipped tables that weren't worth the tip. How Paul Green, the manager, turned a blind eye because as long as receipts kept printing, nothing else mattered. And Clara? She kept her head down, paid her bills, supported her little sister through community college, didn't complain, didn't stir the pot, until one quiet night a man walked through the door, alone, older, quiet, black slacks, a worn button-down, a calm kind of dignity. Amanda ignored him. Derek smirked. But Clara? She walked over, smiled, and said, "Evening, sir. Just you tonight?" And from that moment forward, everything began to change. Clara Bennett didn't make a noise when she walked into Rose Lake Diner each morning. She didn't need to. The rhythm of her day was built on silence, the kind that came from years of doing the right thing without being noticed. Her steps were quiet. Her smile was small but steady, and her presence, though gentle, held the place together in ways no one had ever really bothered to see. She moved behind the counter like clockwork, checking the sugar containers, wiping crumbs from the corners of laminated menus, and smoothing out the creases in her faded burgundy apron. No one asked her to. No one said thank you. But she did it anyway. It had been almost 3 years. 3 years of forgotten double shifts, of covering for coworkers who came in late, of taking the corner booths that others didn't want, the messy families, the grumpy old men, the quiet loners who never tipped well. 3 years of hearing Amanda laugh too loudly when managers were nearby, of watching Derek sneak off for extra breaks while Clara refilled water glasses with a smile, of feeling frustrated every time someone cut in front of her during checkout just because they spoke louder. But Clara never complained, because Clara had bills and responsibilities, and a promise she had made to her little sister back home in Bridgeport that she'd finish college no matter what. Clara never talked about it, never asked for help. She just sent money home each month, quietly covering tuition gaps, grocery runs, and even a used laptop last fall when the old one finally gave out. To everyone else, Clara was just there, dependable, invisible. And in Rose Lake Diner, that kind of kindness, the kind without ego, didn't get you respect. It got you overlooked. This morning wasn't any different. The sun hadn't fully risen, but Clara was already unlocking the side storage room, grabbing the extra napkin refills before anyone else thought to ask. Paul Green, the shift manager, strolled in 30 minutes later, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. He didn't say good morning. He didn't have to. He wasn't the type. Amanda showed up 5 minutes late, hair still damp, eyeliner perfectly winged. She winked at Paul, dropped her bag behind the counter, and immediately started complaining about tips. Derek arrives shortly after, sliding into the kitchen with that same smug walk he always had, the one that said, "I'm not here to work, I'm here to be seen." Clara kept wiping the counter. She knew the drill. They barely noticed her, but she noticed everything. Like how Paul always gave Amanda the tables with the highest foot traffic, right near the windows, the ones most likely to tip big. Or how Derek mysteriously ended up with the slower sections whenever he didn't feel like dealing with people. Or how every time an elderly customer came in alone, Amanda rolled her eyes. Derek vanished to the back. Paul looked the other way. There was a system here, not one anyone wrote down, but one that lived in glances, in tones of voice, in who got help and who didn't. Clara had learned to survive inside that system, but lately, it had started to wear on her. She didn't want to become like them, but sometimes she wondered if being invisible was just as bad. That morning, as she wiped down table 5, a small girl in pigtails dropped her crayon and started to cry. Her mom looked exhausted. Amanda walked by, didn't even glance their way. Clara bent down, picked up the crayon, and smiled. "Here you go, sweetheart. Purple's too pretty to lose." The little girl sniffled, then giggled. Her mom mouthed, "Thank you," as if Clara had handed her the moon. Clara just smiled and moved on. It was such a small thing, so small that most people would never think twice about it. But that was Clara, doing small things in a world that had forgotten how much they mattered. She didn't know it yet, not then, but someone had been watching. And in just 24 hours, everything was going to change. The bell above the diner door jingled, sharp and clear against the soft clatter of forks and the low hum of morning conversation. Clara glanced up instinctively from the coffee pot she was refilling. And there he was, an older black man, maybe in his late 60s, neatly dressed, not flashy, not polished, just clean. Pressed slacks, a worn navy jacket, shoes that had been shined once long ago. He stepped in with a quiet kind of confidence, but there was something hesitant in the way his eyes scanned the room. Like a man who had walked into too many places and learned to expect too little. Clara knew that look. She'd seen it before, in the eyes of people who had been judged before they even spoke. Amanda didn't move. She was leaning on the counter, twirling a pen and pretending not to see him. Derek stood by the soda machine, sipping Sprite and cracking jokes with one of the busboys. Neither of them offered a greeting, not even a nod. The silence around the man stretched just a second too long. And that second, it said everything. Clara could feel the knot in her stomach forming again, the same one she felt every time this happened. Every time someone walked in and got measured by how expensive their watch looked or didn't. She didn't think. She just moved. "Good morning, sir," Clara said, her voice warm, steady, cutting through the hush like sunlight through a cloud. "Just you today?" The man turned toward her, surprised. His face, lined but strong, softened at the corners. "Yes, just me." "Booth or table?" "Booth," he replied after a pause. "If that's all right?" "Absolutely." She led him toward one of the corner booths by the window. Not flashy, not hidden, just peaceful, comfortable. The kind of seat she always reserved for people who looked like they carried too much silence with them. As he slid into the seat, Clara offered him a menu and her signature smile, gentle but real. "Take your time. Can I get you started with something to drink?" He smiled back, small but genuine. "Coffee, black." "You've got it." She turned to walk back toward the counter, but out of the corner of her eye, she saw Amanda watching, leaning into Derek's shoulder, whispering something behind her palm. Both of them were snickering. Clara kept walking. She could hear their thoughts even without hearing their words. Why waste energy on someone who probably won't tip? But Clara didn't serve kindness expecting payment. She just didn't know how to be any other way. Back at the booth, she set the coffee down gently. "Here you go, sir." "Thank you," he said. Then, almost hesitating, "Are you the only one working this morning?" Clara's eyes flicked toward the others again. Amanda was now scrolling through her phone. Derek had disappeared to the back, probably avoiding the morning prep. She smiled, dry but kind. "Some days it feels like it." The man gave a soft chuckle, low, thoughtful. He sipped the coffee and looked out the window for a long second before glancing back up. "What's good here?" he asked. "Well," Clara said, slipping into the familiar rhythm that always helped her forget the weight of the place. "Depends on what you're in the mood for. The eggs. Benedict is solid if you're hungry, but the spinach omelet? That's my favorite." He nodded slowly. "Omelet it is. I'll put it in. Shouldn't take long." As she walked toward the kitchen, she caught Paul, the manager, stepping out of his office. His eyes swept the floor, landing briefly on the older man before turning to Amanda. He didn't ask who seated him, didn't ask if anyone had taken the table. He didn't need to. The moment he saw Clara, his mouth thinned. His posture stiffened, but he said nothing, just like always. Back in the kitchen, Clara handed in the order ticket and leaned against the counter for a moment, exhaling quietly. This wasn't the first time she'd been watched for doing the right thing, but something about this morning felt different. He hadn't said much, but the man's eyes, they held something. Observation, but not judgment. Curiosity, maybe, or something deeper. She didn't know, and she had no way of knowing that the man sitting at table 9 wasn't just another quiet customer. He was Jerome Wexley, owner of Rose Lake Diner, chief executive officer of a multi-state hospitality group, a man who had built a business from scratch only to watch in recent months complaints start to trickle in about favoritism, about disrespect, about a place that no longer felt like it cared. And he hadn't come for eggs. He had come for answers, and now he had one. Her name was Clara Bennett, and the next 24 hours would change both their lives. The next morning, the sky over Ashton was still gray when Clara pulled into the parking lot of Rose Lake Diner. Her shift wasn't for another 20 minutes, but she always came early. It gave her a moment to breathe before the day began, before the coffee pots hissed and orders piled up, and Amanda started flinging sarcasm like napkins. Clara sat in the driver's seat for a few seconds longer, gripping the steering wheel. Last night had stayed with her. The man she'd served, the one who thanked her like it mattered, his voice still echoed in her mind. Not because of what he said, but how he said it. Calm, steady, present. It had been a long time since a customer made her feel like a person, not a walking notepad. Clara exhaled, grabbed her apron from the passenger seat, and headed inside. But the second she opened the door, something was off. The radio wasn't playing. Amanda wasn't cracking jokes or mocking someone under her breath. Derek wasn't pretending to be busy. The place was too quiet, not calm, not peaceful, just still, like a hallway after bad news. Both Amanda and Derek were already there, standing by the counter. Neither said a word. Clara paused. "Morning," she offered. Amanda smirked. Derek didn't look up. Clara kept walking, tying her apron behind her back. That's when she heard it. The creak of Paul Green's office door opening. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. She turned. Paul stood in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, jaw tight. His eyes didn't carry the usual irritation. Today, they were cold. "Clara," he said flatly, "I need to see you." She blinked, caught off guard. "Is something wrong?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked back inside. Clara followed, her heartbeat suddenly louder than her steps. The office was cramped and dim. blinds closed against the early light. On the desk, a manila folder lay open. Her name was printed on the top corner. Paul didn't offer her a seat. He just leaned against the desk, arms still folded, and said, "We're letting you go." The words landed like glass shattering. "I'm sorry?" Clara asked, her voice catching in her throat. "It's not working out." 3 years, never late, never missed a shift, covered double shifts without complaint, dealt with every rude customer, every slammed door, every shift no one else wanted. And now, just like that? "Why?" she asked, her voice low. "What did I do?" Paul's face didn't flinch. "It's not personal." "But it feels personal," she said. He shrugged. "We're making changes." Clara stood there, stunned. "Is this because yesterday, with the customer?" Paul's silence was her answer. She took a step back. "I treated him with respect," she said quietly. "That's literally the job." Paul looked past her. "You can collect your last check next week." Clara's fingers curled into fists. For a second, she wanted to shout, to demand fairness, to tell Paul exactly what she thought of this place, of the way it rewarded cruelty and punished compassion. But then she looked at him and realized something deeper. He wasn't ashamed. He didn't even question it. Clara untied her apron and set it down on the chair beside her. As she turned to leave, she paused. "You know this isn't right," she said. Paul didn't answer. Outside the office, Amanda was pretending to check receipts. Derek leaned against the counter like he was watching a show. Clara didn't look at either of them. She just walked past, slow, steady, no tears, just a fire in her chest. She pushed through the front doors into the cold morning air, heart pounding, lungs tight. 3 years gone, for doing the right thing, for treating someone like a human being. She got into her car and sat there for a long time, staring through the windshield as the world moved on without her. No job, no warning, no explanation, just silence. Until her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. Her finger hovered over the answer button, and something in her gut told her this wasn't over. Clara stared at the phone in her hand like it had come to life. The screen still glowed. Unknown number. She hesitated, thumb hovering, then tapped to answer. "Hello?" she said, voice guarded. There was a pause. Then came the voice, deep, calm, familiar. "Clara Bennett?" She straightened in her seat. "Yes. Who's this?" The voice didn't rush, didn't stumble, just spoke with the quiet certainty of someone used to being listened to. "My name is Jerome Foster." Clara frowned. I don't think we've met." "We have," the voice replied. "Yesterday, at Rose Lake Diner." Her heart skipped. The man, the one no one else would serve, the one she had served. Clara's hand tightened around the phone. "Oh, right. Of course, I'm sorry." "No need to apologize," Jerome said gently. "You were the only person who spoke to me like I mattered. That's why I'm calling." Clara blinked. "I heard what happened this morning," he continued. "That they let you go." Clara exhaled a bitter laugh. "Well, word travels fast around here. I have ears everywhere," he said, a trace of something unreadable in his voice, "especially in places that wear my name." She paused. "What do you mean by that?" Jerome's voice lowered, not threatening but steady. "I own Rose Lake Diner." Silence. Clara froze. The world felt like it tilted slightly beneath her. "I'm sorry. You what?" "You heard me, Clara." Clara's mind raced, the pieces snapping together, the calm way he'd observed the restaurant, the way he scanned the room, the quiet smile that had lingered behind his eyes like he knew more than he let on. She had served him salmon and coffee, and somehow she'd served the owner. "You're the boss?" she whispered. "I'm the founder," he said. "I started Rose Lake back in '94, built it from the ground up. Ashton was the third location. Clara swallowed, her throat dry. But why were you there? Why not just send someone? I could have sent someone, Jerome replied, but I've learned the truth hides behind closed doors. People show who they really are when they think no one is watching. He let that settle for a moment before adding, and yesterday, I saw the truth. Clara felt the heat rush to her cheeks, not embarrassment, rage. So you let me get fired? On purpose? A pause. Yes. Her breath caught. Why would you do that? I needed to be sure, Jerome said. I've gotten too comfortable relying on reports, numbers, and managers like Paul. But numbers can be polished, reports can lie. But people, he added, how they treat others when there's nothing to gain, that never lies. Clara sat back, stunned. I'm sorry it had to go this way, he said, more gently now. I know it wasn't fair, but I needed to see the full picture, and now I have it. Clara stared out the windshield, watching a bird land on the empty parking lot. Everything felt surreal. I knew that place was broken, she said softly. But I never thought doing the right thing would be the thing that got me thrown out. It's always the right ones who pay first, Jerome murmured. That's why I'm calling, because I need someone like you. Clara blinked. What do you mean? I need someone who remembers what hospitality actually means. Who understands that kindness isn't weakness, that dignity doesn't have a price tag. Her heart thudded. I don't know what you're saying. I'm offering you a job, Jerome said. A new job. Clara's chest tightened. You'd come back, he said. But not as a server, she swallowed. Then as what? Jerome didn't pause this time. As the new manager of Rose Lake Diner, Ashton Branch. Clara's lips parted. What? She breathed. You heard me, Jerome said, voice firmer now. Paul's done. Amanda and Derek, I'll leave that to your discretion. What matters is this. I want you to lead, to clean house, and to bring that place back to the values it was supposed to stand for. Clara stared at the dashboard, not seeing anything, her whole body still. But I'm not, she started. You are, he said, cutting gently across her doubt. You are exactly what that place needs. And in that moment, through the shock, the hurt, the disbelief, something flickered in Clara's chest. A kiss ember, not of revenge, of purpose. I need time to think, she whispered. Take the evening, Jerome said. But we start early, 7 a.m. tomorrow. If you're in, walk through those doors. If not, I'll understand. She didn't respond right away. She didn't have to. The silence told him everything he needed to know. Jerome ended the call with one final sentence. Sometimes, Clara, it takes someone brave to remind the rest of us what right looks like. The line went dead, and Clara sat there in the driver's seat, breathing in a future she hadn't seen coming. Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the pale moonlight painting long lines across her bedroom wall. The world outside was quiet, the kind of silence that comes only in the hours between what was and what could be. But inside her chest, everything churned. She thought about her apron, still hanging by the door, about the smell of bacon grease that clung to her shoes, about the weight of 3 years spent being invisible, and one phone call that changed everything. She thought about Jerome's voice, not just what he said, but how he said it. Calm, clear, no false promises, no theatrics, just the truth. And she thought about Rose Lake Diner, about Amanda's cruel little smirks, Derek's smug silence, and Paul's cold dismissal like she had never mattered, like kindness was a mistake and integrity was something you grew out of. But most of all, she thought about what it would mean to walk back in, not just as a waitress, but as the one holding the keys. At 6:12 a.m., Clara stood at her bathroom mirror, brushing her hair back into a simple ponytail. No makeup, no armor, just herself, the same girl they'd fired, but not the same woman. She picked a dark navy blouse from her closet, one that made her feel strong, not flashy, just steady. She buttoned it slowly, then reached for her lanyard, the one that used to hold her server badge. It was empty now, but not for long. By 6:55 a.m., she stood across the street from Rose Lake Diner, her breath fogging in the early morning chill. The sky was just beginning to blush pink at the edges, and the diner windows were still lit with that same warm glow she knew by heart, lights flickering on above empty booths, fresh coffee brewing behind the counter. Clara could feel her heart pounding, steady but loud, like footsteps before a confrontation. But it wasn't fear that stopped her. It was clarity. Because this time, she wasn't walking in to take orders. She was walking in to rewrite them. At exactly 7 a.m., Clara crossed the street, each step quiet but certain. She pushed open the front door. The familiar bell jingled overhead, and the whole room paused. Amanda stood near the drink station, mid-sip. Her hand froze halfway to her lips. Derek was stacking menus by the counter, but his head snapped up like he'd seen a ghost. One of the kitchen boys peeked out from the swinging doors and immediately disappeared again. Nobody spoke. Clara didn't rush. She walked toward the center of the room and placed her bag down on the counter, not loudly, not with drama, just firmly. Amanda finally found her voice. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice already curling into sarcasm. "Forget you got fired?" Clara didn't respond. She just looked at her. And then, from behind her, the front door opened again. Every head turned. Jerome Foster stepped inside, same pressed coat, same calm walk. But this time, his presence cracked through the room like thunder beneath the surface. Amanda's mouth dropped open. Derek paled. Paul Green, the manager, came out of his office holding a clipboard, already annoyed. "What's going on out here?" he muttered, flipping through paperwork. Then he looked up, saw Jerome, and stopped cold. "Mr. Foster," Paul said, voice stumbling. I didn't know you were in town." Jerome offered him a polite, empty smile. "No one did," he said smoothly. "That's how you learn the truth." He turned to the room. "I'm not going to waste your time," he said, voice steady. "This diner, my diner, has strayed from what it was meant to be. Somewhere along the way, decency became optional, dignity became selective." His eyes scanned the staff, then landed on Paul. "That ends today." Paul's smile twitched. "I'm not sure what you've heard, but—" "Save it," Jerome interrupted. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. "You're done here," he said, effective immediately. Paul blinked. "What?" "You heard me," Jerome said. "Turn in your keys. Pack your things." Amanda let out a small gasp. Derek looked like he wanted to vanish. Jerome didn't flinch. He turned to the rest of the room. "Some of you have forgotten what it means to serve people, to see people, but one of you didn't." He turned to Clara. "This is Clara Bennett," he said. "She served me with respect when everyone else turned their back. Not because she knew who I was, but because she knew who she was." The room held its breath. "She is your new manager." Silence. Amanda's face twisted. "You're kidding." "You're welcome to leave if that bothers you," Jerome said flatly. Derek looked like he might be sick. Clara said nothing. Not yet. She let the weight of it settle. Let the disbelief run its course. Then she turned to the team, the same people who once watched her walk out in silence. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "I'm not here for revenge," she said. "I'm here for change." And just like that, Rose Lake Diner was no longer the same place. Because Clara wasn't the same woman. Clara stood behind the counter, the same one she used to wipe down between shifts, the same one where Amanda used to lean with crossed arms and a tilted smirk. But today, it felt different. Not because the counter had changed, but because she had. Around her, the morning rush had begun. Customers filtered in, a construction worker with mud on his boots, an elderly couple with clasped hands, a student reading from a chemistry textbook as she stirred her coffee absently. Life went on. But beneath the surface, everyone in the diner knew something had shifted. The girl they'd ignored, the one who used to refill ketchup bottles in silence, now held the keys. And whether they wanted to admit it or not, they felt it in the way she stood, the way she watched, the way she didn't raise her voice but somehow still filled the room. Amanda was now visibly rattled, moving stiffly through her section. Derek kept glancing toward Clara between orders, as if trying to gauge what kind of leader she would be. But Clara didn't storm in with rules. She didn't post new policies on the walls or demand instant respect. She started small, observing, listening. On her first full day back, Clara spent the morning shadowing every station. She helped prep eggs in the kitchen, brewed coffee on the line. She even jumped into a bus booth when one of the teens missed a spot. She didn't bark commands. She asked questions. She listened to what people said and what they didn't. By noon, even the skeptical ones began to take notice, especially when she gathered the team in the back room for a meeting. Not a confrontation, just a talk. The same back room where Tom used to lecture them with arms crossed and eyes cold. Now Clara stood with a notebook in one hand and a gentle firmness in her tone. "I'm not going to pretend the past didn't happen," she began. "I know how this place was run. I know some of you were part of that. And I know some of you just went along to survive." Eyes flickered across the room. Amanda sat with her arms crossed. Derek leaned against the wall, guarded. A few of the kitchen crew looked cautiously hopeful. Clara paused, then continued. "But I didn't come back to point fingers. I came back because I believe this place can be better, and it starts with how we treat people. All people." Silence. Then Clara took a breath and held up a sheet of paper. "This is our new bonus structure," she said. "Tips still matter, but starting now, every staff member's weekly bonus will include customer satisfaction reviews." Derek blinked. "You mean like surveys?" "Yes," Clara replied. "Anonymous, honest ones. Because if a customer walks out of here feeling disrespected, then we've failed, no matter how fast the food came out." Amanda scoffed quietly. "What if they lie? People complain about anything." Clara didn't flinch. "And what if they're right?" That stopped Amanda short. "This isn't about chasing perfection," Clara said, soft but unshakable. "It's about creating a place where no one feels invisible. Not the guests, not the staff." One of the kitchen boys, Jorge, barely 20, lifted a hand. "Even the dishwashers?" he asked shyly. Clara smiled. "Especially the dishwashers." That cracked something open in the room. Shoulders eased. A few nods rippled across the group. Even Derek looked like he was reconsidering something. That afternoon, Clara made time for one-on-one talks, not performance reviews, just human check-ins. She sat with Jasmine, the part-time server who worked double shifts to care for her dad, with Jorge, who admitted no one had ever asked him what he wanted to learn, with Theo, the college kid who used to hide behind the fryers, convinced no one even knew his name. And each conversation ended the same way, not with a threat, not with a script, but with a simple promise. This place will only change if we change it together. That night, as Clara locked up, she stood by the window and watched the last customer wave goodbye. A woman in her 60s, alone, but smiling. She had left a tip twice the bill and written in shaky cursive on the receipt, "Thank you for seeing me." Clara folded the slip of paper gently, tucking it into her pocket. Behind her, Amanda scrubbed down the counter without a word. Derek swept the floor in silence, but Clara didn't need them to speak. Not yet. Because sometimes, the most important part of leadership is letting silence become space. A space where change can begin. And tonight, Rose Lake Diner finally felt like it had room to breathe again. It started with the little things, not the big, dramatic transformations people expected when someone new took over, but the quieter changes. The kind that didn't shout but whispered. The kind that stuck. On Clara's third day back, she noticed that Theo, the college kid who used to avoid eye contact, had started greeting guests without needing to be reminded. He even smiled. Not the forced, polite kind, but something real. Tentative maybe, but real. Jorge, the shy dishwasher, had taken it upon himself to organize the entire back sink area, labeling shelves, even fixing the broken spray handle no one had touched in weeks. When Clara thanked him, he flushed red and mumbled, "Just wanted it to make sense." But the biggest shift? It was in the way customers began walking out with their heads a little higher. It was subtle, a pause at the door, a lingering look back, a small nod of approval. A week earlier, half of them wouldn't have remembered their server's name. Now, they were asking. And Clara didn't miss the irony. The very people Amanda and Derek had once ignored, the blue-collar workers, the quiet retirees, the single parents with messy toddlers, they were the ones returning because they felt seen. And people always return to places where they feel human. Midweek, a moment happened that changed everything. It was just after lunch. The diner had thinned out, the clatter of plates giving way to the hum of the radio and the occasional hiss of the coffee machine. A young woman walked in, maybe 19, maybe 20. Wide eyes, messy hair, holding a notepad like it was a shield. Clara spotted her immediately. She remembered the name from the online application, Sienna. No prior restaurant experience. Just 3 short sentences on her form. "I want to learn. I know I'm not polished, but I won't let you down." Clara had almost skipped the name. Too much to do. Too many other applicants with longer resumes. But something about that honesty had stuck with her. Now, standing at the door, Sienna looked like she might bolt. Clara stepped forward. "Hi there," she said, warm and calm. "You must be Sienna." The girl blinked. "Yeah, I'm sorry. I can come back if this is a bad time." Clara shook her head. "It's the perfect time." She offered a smile, not the kind that demanded anything, just one that said, "You belong here." Over the next hour, Clara trained Sienna herself, not just where the spoons went or how to input an order, but how to look someone in the eye, how to listen, how to care. "This job isn't about being fast," she told her gently. "It's about being present." Sienna nodded, soaking in every word. At the end of her first shadow shift, she whispered, "I've never had anyone teach me like this." Clara gave her a knowing look. "Because no one ever taught me either." That night, Sienna stayed late to help mop. Amanda rolled her eyes as she passed, muttering just loud enough, "Overachiever." But Clara caught the look in Derek's eyes. It wasn't mockery. It was recognition. The next morning, Derek showed up early. Didn't say why. Just grabbed a rag and started polishing the front windows, something no one had asked him to do in over a year. Clara passed him once, said nothing, just nodded. Because sometimes, the best kind of accountability isn't public shame. It's a quiet example. And Rose Lake Diner, it was beginning to remember who it used to be. That evening, as the last customer left, Clara sat at the counter, flipping through a few comment cards left behind. Most were simple. "Great coffee," "Clean bathroom," but one stood out. It was written in block letters, all caps, like someone unsure of their handwriting. "First time I've been here in months. Last time, no one even said hello. This time, I'm coming back. Tell whoever's in charge, thank you." Clara read it twice, folded it carefully, and placed it in the same pocket where she kept the note from the older woman the week before. 2 scraps of paper, barely worth $1, but to her, they were worth everything. Outside, the neon sign flickered to life. Rose Lake Diner. Same name, same walls. But a new heart was beating quietly inside. And tomorrow would be another day worth fighting for. It started with a bell. Software, familiar. The kind of sound that had rung 1,000 times before without anyone looking up. But this time, it felt different. Clara was wiping down the pastry display when she heard it. The front door swung open, letting in the early autumn chill. She turned her head, half expecting a delivery guy or a regular on their morning coffee run. But instead, she saw him, the older gentleman with the cane, Mr. Albright. She hadn't seen him in almost 6 months, not since that afternoon Amanda had served him last, or rather, hadn't. He had waited 20 minutes at the window booth, alone, ignored, left without a word. Clara remembered the way he paused at the exit that day, like he wanted to say something but knew it wouldn't matter. Now, here he was, hat in hand, eyes scanning the room. Clara stepped forward with a quiet smile. "Welcome back, sir." He blinked, surprised. "You remember me?" "Of course," she said gently. "Would you like your booth by the window?" He hesitated, then nodded. As he walked, slowly, deliberately, Clara noticed something else. Behind him, a mother with 2 kids trailed in. Then a construction worker with paint on his jeans. Then a young woman in scrubs, clearly coming off a night shift. One after another. People who used to come here and then stopped. People who had once been invisible. Now they were returning. And this time, they were being seen. By mid-morning, the diner was buzzing. Not with noise, but with warmth. Laughter floated across the booths. Refills were offered without being asked. Sienna, now in her 2nd week, moved with more confidence, her smile genuine as she greeted guests. At the corner table, a pair of teenage students were studying between bites of pancakes. One of them, a tall boy with glasses and a cracked laptop, waved Clara over. "Ma'am," he said, voice soft. "I just wanted to say..." He paused, awkward. Clara waited. "I used to come here with my dad, before." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Clara nodded. "It feels better now," he said. Clara smiled. "Thank you," she replied. "That means more than you know." Behind the counter, Derek watched. He didn't say anything. Just kept pouring coffee, a little quieter than usual. He had stopped mumbling complaints under his breath. Started showing up early. Stayed late once last week. No one asked. Change wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just showing up differently. By afternoon, the sun was casting golden light through the blinds. The place glowed. And for the first time in a long time, Rose Lake Diner didn't feel like a battlefield between the fake and the faithful. It felt like a neighborhood again. It felt like home. Clara stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. As she stood near the front steps, arms crossed lightly, she spotted something across the street, a woman sitting on a bench, notebook in hand. Young, nervous, watching. Their eyes met. She looked away. Clara tilted her head, crossed the street. "Hi," she said, friendly but calm. "You've been out here for a while." The girl, maybe 19, blushed. "Sorry, I wasn't spying or anything, She held up the notebook. "Writing. I'm supposed to observe places for my sociology class." Clara smiled. "You picked a good day." The girl chuckled softly. "Yeah, I don't know what changed in there, but people look happy, like respected. You don't see that a lot." Clara paused, then said something simple, something she hadn't planned. "We started remembering that kindness isn't extra." The girl nodded slowly. "Mind if I quote you?" Clara laughed. go for it." That night, after closing, Clara sat at the counter alone. Lights dimmed, the place finally quiet. She held a cup of tea and stared at the comment jar they'd put out last week. It was nearly full, but it wasn't the quantity that mattered. It was what the note said. "Thank you for looking me in the eye. First time I wasn't rushed out. Feels like people care again." And tucked at the bottom, in shaky handwriting, "You make old folks like me feel human." Clara closed her eyes. This wasn't about policies. It wasn't about power. It was about presence. It was about repairing something small, a thread of dignity that had been missing. Rose Lake Diner didn't need to be fancy. It just needed to matter. And tomorrow, Jerome was coming back. Not as a test, but to see what she had built. And Clara, she was ready to let him see. Because for the first time, she was proud of what this place had become. The next morning, the light hit Rose Lake Diner just right, golden and clean, like the start of something honest. Inside, the soft clinking of silverware and the low hum of conversations filled the air. Booths were full. Coffee was hot. The smell of fresh cinnamon rolls lingered near the entrance. Clara stood near the back counter, notebook in hand, quietly jotting down inventory for next week's order. She didn't need to micromanage. That was never her style. But she listened, observed, nudged people where it mattered. No one needed to be watched if they were trusted. And today, she felt that trust moving through the walls like warm air on a winter day. "Table 4 wants to know if we still have the caramel apple pie," Sienna called out from the register, her cheeks flushed. "Tell them we saved the last 2 slices just for them," Clara answered, smiling. Then the door chimed, and she knew. She didn't need to look up. She just felt it. Jerome stepped inside like a man who'd been watching from afar and finally came home. Same coat, same quiet presence. But this time, his posture was different. Not guarded, not testing, just curious. He stood for a moment, scanning the room, and what he saw made him pause. A young man in work boots was helping an elderly customer with her tray. Derek, yes, Derek, was refilling drinks with an ease that didn't look forced. Sienna had 3 customers laughing at the front booth, and Clara, she was just watching, not directing, not controlling, guiding like a gentle current beneath the surface. Jerome made his way toward the corner booth, the same one he had once been ignored in. This time, it was already set, clean, water poured, menu placed neatly. Clara had made sure of it, without saying a word. She approached a moment later, her hands folded lightly in front of her. "Morning, sir," she said. He looked up at her, something proud in his eyes. "Clara," she nodded, a quiet smile. "Good to see you." "Likewise." She slid into the seat across from him, uninvited but welcome. Jerome took in the room again. "How's it been?" he asked. Clara tilted her head slightly, thinking. "Some days are tough," she said. "Old habits don't break overnight." Jerome gave a knowing smile. "They don't. But they bend," she added. "Eventually." He nodded slowly. "I can see that." For a moment, neither of them said anything, just watched. Then, at the booth near the door, a small commotion broke out. A child, no older than 6, had knocked over his juice. The glass shattered, orange liquid spreading across the floor. The mother looked mortified. The boy's eyes filled with panic. But before the mother could even reach for napkins, Clara was already there. She crouched, looked the child in the eye. "It's okay," she said gently. "It was just a cup. Cups are easy to replace." The boy blinked, surprised. So did Jerome. Clara smiled at the mother. "Let me grab you another one." No sigh, no scolding. Just calm, just care. She moved back to the kitchen, poured a new glass herself, and returned with a cloth to clean the mess. The mother whispered, "Thank you." Clara simply nodded. "Happens to all of us." When she returned to Jerome's booth, he was still watching, not just impressed, moved. He leaned back. "That," he said softly, "is leadership." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Cleaning up juice?" "No," Jerome said. "Making people feel safe when they expect to be punished." He paused. "That's rarer than you think." She didn't answer right away. Then, "I used to think I needed a title to matter here." Jerome waited. "But it was never about the title," she said. "It was about the space I created when I showed up as myself." "And now?" he asked. Clara looked out at the room. The conversations, the smiles, the quiet dignity being restored in tiny, unnoticed ways. "Now," she said, "I just try to protect that space so others can show up too." Jerome exhaled, slowly, as if something he'd been holding in had finally released. "I didn't make a mistake then," he said. "No," Clara replied, steady. "You didn't." He stood, buttoned his coat, left a 20 on the table, not for the food, but for the faith. Before he turned to go, he looked at her one last time. "Keep building, Clara." "I will," she said. He walked out without fanfare, but in his wake, something settled, like roots pushing deeper. Clara turned back to her team and smiled, because the hardest part wasn't getting the title. The hardest part was earning the culture, and today, she saw it blooming quietly, steadily, everywhere she looked. 2 weeks later, the "now hiring" sign came down from the window. It hadn't been up long, just long enough to find one person, one right person. Clara had read dozens of applications, skimmed resumes filled with years of experience, references from big-name chains, even a few former managers. But that's not what she had been looking for. Not this time. She had learned something through all the noise, through all the fire and fallout. What mattered most in a team member wasn't what they knew, it was what they noticed. And that's why, on a rainy Wednesday morning, Clara found herself sitting across from a girl who barely had any restaurant experience but carried something rarer. Grace. That was her name. 21. Nervous. Eyes that darted too quickly, and shoulders that flinched every time a customer raised their voice. She reminded Clara of someone. Too much, maybe. "You've had kind of a rough year," Clara said, reviewing the handwritten application. "You don't have to explain everything, but I'd like to understand what brings you here." Grace hesitated, then shrugged lightly. "I worked at 2 diners before. Quit both." "Why?" Clara asked gently. Grace's voice was quiet. "Because the manager said I smiled too much, but the customers said I didn't smile enough." Clara blinked. "I just never did anything right," Grace added. "Not fast enough, not bold enough, not invisible enough." Clara sat back in her chair, let the silence stretch, then smiled softly. "You're hired." Grace looked up, stunned. "But don't you want to?" "I want someone who understands what being overlooked feels like," Clara said. "Because then you'll know how not to do it to someone else." Grace's eyes shimmered. "Do I need to pretend to be tougher?" "No," Clara said firmly. "You need to learn how to be strong without losing that softness. That's what this place runs on now." That afternoon, Clara introduced Grace to the team, showed her the ropes, walked her through the schedule. But most importantly, she stayed close, not as a boss, but as a guide. She watched how Grace poured coffee, carefully, 2 hands steadying the pot. She watched how she listened to customers, head tilted, actually listening, not just waiting to respond. She watched as she apologized when a plate came out late, even though it wasn't her fault. "You don't need to apologize for things you didn't do," Clara said quietly at the end of the shift. Grace looked down, cheeks red. "It's just a habit." Clara nodded. "I used to do that too." They sat at the counter in silence for a moment, the diner now closed and quiet, save for the distant sound of rain tapping against the windows. Clara reached behind the register, pulled out an old worn notebook, the same one she had used during the worst months. She handed it to Grace. Inside were scribbled notes, names of customers and their usual orders, stories of shifts gone wrong and lessons learned. "This was mine," Clara said. "Now it's yours." Grace's fingers brushed over the cover like it was something sacred. "But I didn't earn this," she said. "You will," Clara replied. Because passing on leadership wasn't about handing someone a title. It was about giving them the tools, the mindset, the quiet courage to lead in the moments when no one else was watching. That night, as Grace left with the notebook clutched to her chest, Clara stood at the window watching her go. And for the first time since taking over, she realized she wasn't just fixing something broken, she was planting something new. And maybe, just maybe, this diner would become the kind of place where no one had to apologize for being kind again. Not on her watch, not ever again. 1 year later, the sun rose over Ashton like any other morning, soft golden light spilling across Main Street, brushing against the windows of Rose Lake Diner. From the outside, not much had changed. Same sign, same red awnings, slightly faded now, same bell over the door, but on the inside, everything was different. The old unspoken tension that used to hang in the air like bad grease was gone. What replaced it wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy. It was quieter, but deeper. The kind of shift you don't always notice right away until you walk out with a full stomach and something lighter sitting in your chest. Clara Bennett stood near the window, wiping down a table before opening. She did it herself, not because there wasn't someone else who could, but because this place still felt personal, still felt like hers. She glanced toward the counter where Grace, now 22, steadier, more confident, was training a new hire, a teenage girl named Lila. First job, first uniform, first day. Clara smiled. Grace spoke with calm authority now, never raising her voice, never needing to. She explained things like someone who had been listened to long enough to know how much it mattered. And that was everything. The bell jingled softly. Clara looked up, and there, walking slowly toward her table, was a familiar face, Mrs. Layton, 83. She walked with a cane now, moved a little slower than last time. But her eyes, still sharp, Clara moved quickly, pulling out a chair before she even had to ask. "Good morning, Mrs. Layton." The old woman smiled. "Still remember how I take my tea?" "Of course," Clara said. "Earl Grey, no sugar, splash of milk." Mrs. Layton chuckled. "You're a rare one, Clara." Clara brought the tea over herself, setting it down gently. But before she could walk away, Mrs. Layton reached into her coat, pulled out a small envelope, yellowed at the edges, folded carefully. "This is for you," she said. Clara hesitated. "What is it?" "A letter," the woman said softly. "I wrote it the day I came back. After you changed this place." Clara opened it slowly. The handwriting was delicate, a little shaky, but clear. "Dear Clara, I came back to this diner thinking I'd just get a sandwich and some warmth, but what I really found was that someone like me still mattered. That day, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Thank you for making this place a home for people like us, the ones who are easy to overlook. With all my heart, Eloise Layton." Clara's throat tightened. She looked up. Mrs. Layton smiled gently. "I meant every word," she said. "This diner, it used to be a place people tolerated. Now, it's a place people trust." Outside the window, a line had begun to form. Young couples, old veterans, students in hoodies, delivery drivers wiping sweat from their brows, all waiting for a seat at a place that used to push them aside. Now it pulled them in. Jerome, the man who once walked in Undercover, stopped by that afternoon. He didn't say much, didn't need to. He walked through the diner slowly, watching, listening. He saw the way Grace coached the new girl, saw how Clara stepped in when a customer got flustered, saw the laughter, the warmth, the humanity. And then, as he left, he paused beside Clara at the door. "You didn't just rebuild this place," he said. "You rewrote what it stands for." Clara didn't say anything right away. She just nodded, then smiled, quiet and full. "I didn't do it alone," she said. And she hadn't. Because real change, lasting change, doesn't come from titles or policies or public speeches. It comes from people. The kind who stay after their shift to walk a nervous new hire through the closing routine. The kind who refill a teacup without being asked. The kind who remember your name even when the world forgets. And that's what Rose Lake Diner had become. Not perfect, but sacred. Because now, it wasn't just serving food. It was serving something stronger. Dignity, hope, and the quiet promise that no matter who you were or how the world had treated you before, here you would be seen, you would be heard, and you would matter. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding everything together. Clara never asked for power. She never raised her voice. All she did was treat people with kindness, even when no one was watching. And for that, she was fired. But what they didn't know was that kindness like hers wasn't supposed to disappear. It rises, it rebuilds, it leads. And in the end, the diner that once silenced her now speaks with her voice. Because the greatest kind of leadership is the kind that remembers what it's like to be unseen. So if you're out there, still doing the right thing when no one claps, still choosing respect in a world that forgets it, don't stop. Because the world doesn't change with noise. It changes when people like you refuse to stop being good, even when it costs you everything. And one day, that quiet goodness will change everything.